Most people never get rich. And it's not because they're dumb, unlucky, or born in the wrong zip code. It's because they can't wait. They want to look rich before they are rich. They trade compound interest for dopamine, and they call it living. In my lifetime, I've seen this story thousands of times. The details change: cars, houses, vacations, crypto, whatever's fashionable, but the script stays the same. Someone earns a decent living, spends all of it, borrows a little more, and then complains about the system. The truth is simpler. They traded the magic of compounding for the vanity of showing off. And that's a deal with the devil that never pays back. When I was young during the Great Depression, people didn't have the luxury of pretending. You either had money or you didn't. No credit cards, no easy loans, no influencer nonsense. If you wanted a car, you saved for it. If you couldn't afford steak, you ate beans. And people still managed to live. Today, people can't wait 2 months for a new phone without an installment plan. They call that progress. I call it financial suicide on a monthly billing cycle. The irony? Most of these people could become millionaires. Not quickly, not easily, but certainly. All they needed was 30 or 40 years of patience, discipline, and boring consistency. But no, that's not sexy enough for them. They'd rather believe there's some secret formula, the hack, that'll skip the waiting. Every generation has its version. Day trading in the 90s, flipping houses in 2006, crypto in 2021. Each time, people think they've found a shortcut. And each time, the shortcut turns into a detour to bankruptcy. The first million is supposed to be hard. It's the test that separates the patient from the impulsive, the savers from the show-offs. If it were easy, your neighbor's dog would be rich too. But here's the paradox. The slower you go, the faster you get there. The people who quietly save, invest, and reinvest without touching their principal end up lapping the ones chasing the next big thing. It's not a theory. It's arithmetic. Let's say you invest $10,000 and compound at 10%. That's $1,000 your first year. Not much, right? So you quit thinking it's too slow. But if you stayed put for 30 years, you'd have nearly 200,000. And you didn't have to lift a finger after year one. That's compounding, the closest thing to magic ever found in finance. But people don't trust what they can't feel. They'd rather gamble than wait. They call it taking risks. I call it impatience dressed up as ambition. When I tell people to save, they nod politely. When I tell them it might take 25 years to hit $1 million, they look at me like I just insulted their intelligence. They want results faster than compounding can deliver. But compounding doesn't care about your impatience. It rewards time, not tantrums. I've always said, the big money is not in the buying or the selling, but in the waiting. And yet, the waiting is what most people can't stomach. They'll do everything, research, trade, speculate, but not the one thing that actually works. Sitting still. They think they're chasing opportunity. In reality, they're running from boredom. You want to know the most underrated financial skill? Boredom tolerance. If you can sit there, do nothing, and let your capital work for you while others chase noise, you'll beat 90% of investors. Not because you're smarter, but because you're less stupid. People confuse activity with progress. They think movement equals success. It's the same logic as a hamster on a wheel. It feels like motion, but it's still inside the cage. The problem with looking rich is that it drains the very fuel you need to become rich. Savings and time. You can't compound what you spend. You can't build wealth while paying interest on debt for things that depreciate faster than your paycheck grows. But people still do it. They spend decades financing a lifestyle they can't sustain, then wonder why retirement looks like a horror movie. They call it bad luck. It's not bad luck, it's bad arithmetic. Here's a brutal truth. Most people won't hit $1 million in their lifetime. Not because it's impossible, but because they won't give compounding a fair chance. They interrupt it constantly with debt, greed, and stupidity. Compounding works like a snowball, but only if you stop kicking it downhill every winter. So when someone asks me, Charlie, when do most people hit $1 million? I tell them, probably never, because the average person doesn't save, doesn't invest, and doesn't stay the course. They want a quick thrill, not a slow result. The path to wealth is simple, painfully simple. Spend less than you earn, invest what's left, and let time do the rest. But simple isn't the same as easy. Most people would rather complicate their lives than simplify their habits. That's why the rich stay rich. They understand restraint. They understand patience. They understand that compounding is a long-term ally, not a weekend fling. The rest, they'll keep chasing the illusion, because looking rich feels better than being rich until the bills arrive. And when they do, it's always too late to start over. Most people are fooled by speed. They think wealth is about moving fast, not thinking straight. They believe if they just find the right opportunity, they'll skip the line. It's a seductive illusion, one that wipes out more savings than recessions ever did. Every generation rediscovers the same fantasy, that there's a secret formula, a once-in-a-lifetime bet that will turn ordinary income into extraordinary wealth. They call it hustle. I call it hallucination. I've watched men jump from one can't-miss scheme to another like drunk tourists chasing the next party. Stocks, options, real estate, Bitcoin, NFTs, you name it. Every time they think this time it's different. And every time they end up learning the same expensive lesson. Compounding takes time, and stupidity compounds faster. In the real world, getting rich is slow. It's not dramatic. It's not exciting. It's mostly a long, dull stretch of doing the right thing over and over while everyone else chases fireworks. The problem is, people mistake boredom for failure. They don't see progress, so they panic. They sell too early, switch strategies, or take on more risk than their brain can handle. Then they blow up, swear off investing, and wait for the next miracle. You can't win that way. Even a drunk guy at a slot machine has better odds. At least he knows it's a gamble. There's a reason I've said the world isn't driven by greed. It's driven by envy. That's what fuels the mirage. You see your friend buy a new car or post screenshots of his trading account, and suddenly your brain short circuits. You stop thinking like an investor and start thinking like a gambler. The envy instinct is ancient. It made sense when humans lived in tribes. If the other guy had more food, you might starve. But in capitalism, envy just makes you stupid. You start copying people who are probably faking it anyway. I've seen this movie too many times. Someone doubles their money on a lucky trade, starts to believe they're a genius, and then gives it all back with interest. As I once said, it's not greed that ruins people. It's the illusion of being smart. The first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. But people do exactly that again and again because they can't stand still. They want to accelerate the process. They forget that acceleration works both ways. It can speed up your losses, too. When Warren and I were buying businesses, we didn't chase anything. We waited years, sometimes decades. We looked for value others were too impatient to wait for. That's why we won. Not because we were smarter, but because we could delay gratification longer than most. People underestimate how rare patience is. In a society that celebrates immediacy, being patient is practically a superpower. It's not fun. It's not glamorous, but it works. You see, the market is designed to transfer wealth from the active to the patient. Every fast money story you hear is balanced by 1,000 quiet bankruptcies you don't. You never hear from the losers. They're too embarrassed to talk about it. But the math is clear. A guy chasing 50% in a year will usually lose it all within 5. A guy earning 8% steadily for 30 years will quietly end up rich. One is loud, the other invisible. Guess which one the world imitates? People ask me, Charlie, what's your best investment? I tell them, patience, because it's the only asset that compounds no matter what the market does. Patiently, you survive. Survival lets you compound. And compounding is the only reliable way to become rich slowly. But slow doesn't sell books or courses or dreams. So people keep chasing the mirage. They think wealth is found in the next stock tip or the next bubble. But wealth is built by avoiding dumb decisions long enough for time to reward your restraint. The market is full of smart people doing dumb things because they can't sit still. They're addicted to action, allergic to boredom, and incapable of waiting for the fruit to ripen. They don't realize that impatience and intelligence cancel each other out. In 2008, I watched brilliant hedge fund managers blow up because they thought they could outsmart gravity. They leveraged everything, betting the cycle wouldn't turn. When it did, they discovered that even geniuses go broke when they borrow too much. Meanwhile, the dull, conservative investors, the ones who looked lazy during the boom, survived. And when the dust settled, they were the only ones left with cash to buy bargains. Slow, steady, boring, and rich. If you learn anything from me, learn this. Wealth is built quietly. The moment it starts looking exciting, you're probably doing something stupid. So yes, most people hit $1 million late in life, if ever, because most people spend their youth chasing illusions instead of compounding realities. They chase shortcuts and end up running in circles. The game isn't about speed. It's about endurance. And the only ones who finish are those who stay in the race long enough for compounding to notice them. Let's get something straight. Money doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care about your ambition, your motivation, or your positive thinking. It only cares about arithmetic. You can't manifest $1 million. You earn it, save it, and compound it slowly. When I was young, I realized most people fail not because they lack opportunity, but because they don't understand basic math. They overestimate what's possible in 5 years and underestimate what's inevitable in 30. That's why they spend half their life chasing shortcuts that compound nothing but regret. Let's do the numbers. If you invest just $500 a month, about the cost of eating out a few times less, and you earn a 7% annual return, you'll have around $600,000 after 30 years. At 8%, it's closer to $680,000. At 10%, just under $1 million. That's it. No magic. No secret hedge fund trick. Just boring, relentless compounding. Now, people hear that and say, 30 years? That's too long. I've got news for you. 30 years are going to pass whether you invest or not. The only question is whether you end up with something or nothing at the end of it. That's the part people never grasp. They live as if time doesn't exist, then panic when it catches up. The first $100,000 is the hardest, as I've said many times. It feels impossible. Every dollar you save looks meaningless. You think, why bother? It's too small to matter. But it does matter. It's the psychological barrier between being a consumer and being a capitalist. Once you cross it, the game changes. That first 100,000 starts working for you. It begins earning money while you sleep, and that's the first real taste of freedom most people ever get. But getting there requires discipline most people don't have. You have to save aggressively, spend wisely, and ignore the noise. The problem isn't low income, it's high consumption. I've met people making $200,000 a year who are broke and janitors who retire as millionaires. The difference isn't intelligence, it's behavior. Money behaves predictably for people who behave predictably. If you can earn, save, and invest consistently, compounding does the rest. If you can't, no miracle will save you. Here's a mental model I like. Imagine money as seeds. Every dollar you earn is a seed. You can either eat it now or plant it. Eat too many and you'll starve later. Plant enough and you'll never go hungry again. The problem is that most people want fruit from seeds they never planted. They look at the neighbor's orchard and start envying the trees without realizing that man spent decades watering, pruning, and waiting. It's not the math that's hard. It's the patience. People don't like slow feedback loops. They want immediate proof that what they're doing is working. But compounding doesn't show results in months. It shows them in decades. That's why the early years are deceptive. You save diligently, invest carefully, and your account barely moves. Then, one day, the snowball starts rolling, and suddenly, your money earns more than you do. That's when it gets fun. That's when you realize why rich people look so calm. They have time and capital working for them 24 hours a day. But if you quit early, you'll never see that part. You'll spend your life starting and stopping, always chasing new strategies, never compounding long enough to win. The formula for wealth is brutally simple. Savings rate times time times rate of return. Most people only focus on the last part, rate of return. They think if they can just find a higher return, they'll shortcut the process. So they gamble. They overtrade. They take absurd risks. And eventually, they lose both their capital and their confidence. But here's the thing, your savings rate and time horizon matter far more than your return. A person who saves diligently for 30 years at 7% will beat the one chasing 20% who keeps blowing up every few years. The tortoise always beats the hare, not because it's smarter, but because it's still in the race when the hare burns out. When Warren and I started, we weren't geniuses. We were just relentless. We didn't interrupt compounding with stupid decisions. We didn't care what the market did next week. We cared about what it would do over a lifetime. And lifetime thinking changes everything. It removes the drama, the envy, the obsession with speed. You realize wealth isn't about timing the market. It's about time in the market. $1 million sounds impressive until you realize it's just the inevitable outcome of not being stupid for long enough. That's the entire secret. But people don't like that answer. It's too boring, too slow, too rational. They'd rather gamble than wait, even when the math tells them waiting works. So, yes, most people could hit $1 million. The math says it's possible. The psychology says it isn't, because compounding doesn't just test your money, it tests your character. And character, not intelligence, is what separates the wealthy from the wannabes. You don't need genius to get rich. You need endurance. And endurance isn't built on excitement, it's built on patience, discipline, and the willingness to look boring for a very long time. If that sounds dull, good. That means it's probably going to work. Let's be honest, most people don't hit $1 million until it's too late to enjoy it. If they hit it at all, the average disciplined saver reaches that milestone somewhere between their late 40s and mid-50s. That's if they've been consistent, rational, and relatively lucky, meaning they avoided major stupidity along the way. It's not because the math demands it. It's because human nature delays it. People waste their 20s chasing status. They waste their 30s cleaning up the damage from their 20s. And by their 40s, they finally wake up to the reality that compounding rewards time, not apologies. By the time they get serious, they've already lost the most valuable resource in finance, early years. The tragedy is that time doesn't announce itself as an opportunity while you have it. It just slips by quietly while you're busy doing something more important, like buying things you don't need to impress people who don't care. $1 million sounds like a huge number when you're 25. By the time you reach 50, it's just the cost of not screwing up. Because inflation, taxes, and lifestyle eat away at what used to be a fortune. When I was young, a millionaire was a rare species. Today, it's just someone who managed not to self-destruct for 3 decades. The math hasn't changed, only the behavior has. People earn more than ever but save less than ever. They want to enjoy life now as if later were a myth. The result? They reach 60 and start talking about catching up. Good luck catching up with compound interest. It doesn't negotiate. Compounding is like a loyal partner in marriage. It rewards consistency, not intensity. You can't neglect it for 20 years and expect it to forgive you later. People always ask me, Charlie, what's the right age to start investing? And I tell them, yesterday. The next best time is today. Every year you delay, you're not just losing time, you're losing exponential time. Because compounding isn't linear, it's geometric. You don't just lose 1 year, you lose the growth that 1 year would have multiplied for the next 30. That's how people end up old and broke with stories instead of dividends. Let me give you an example. Two people invest the same amount, $10,000 a year, at the same return rate. The first starts at age 25 and stops at 35. The second waits until 35 and continues until retirement at 65. Guess who ends up richer? The one who stopped early, because his money had an extra decade to compound. Time did more work than effort ever could. But tell that to a 25-year-old who just got their first paycheck. They'll laugh, say, I'll start later, and spend the next decade financing a lifestyle they can't sustain. That's why the age people hit $1 million is less about income and more about when they stop being stupid. Some never stop. They keep refinancing, upgrading, trading, chasing, and envying. Then one day they wake up and realize they've been busy for 40 years, but productive for none. Wealth doesn't come from motion, it comes from direction. Most people confuse the two. They work hard but aim nowhere. They save sporadically, invest emotionally, and expect rational results. When Warren and I built Berkshire, we didn't rush. We understood that the first 20 years were just planting season. The harvest came much later, but it came in truckloads. By then, the compounding machine was unstoppable. Most people never reach that phase because they can't stick around long enough. They want progress every quarter, not every decade. But compounding doesn't care about your calendar. It cares about discipline, not impatience. Here's the brutal truth. You probably hit $1 million after you've learned how meaningless that number really is. Because by the time you get there, you'll realize it wasn't the number that mattered, it was who you became while earning it. You'll realize wealth wasn't about being clever, it was about not being careless, not overspending, not over-leveraging, not overreacting. That's how the real millionaires are made, quietly, invisibly, without applause. They're not in your feed showing off. They're the people you underestimate because they drive old cars and live below their means. The irony is that these boring people hit $1 million sooner than the ones trying to look successful. Because the ones trying to look successful are too busy buying liabilities disguised as luxuries. If you want to know when most people hit $1 million, I can tell you the statistical answer around 55. But the philosophical answer is better. You hit it the day you stop needing it to prove anything. That's the point when money stops being a scoreboard and starts being a tool. When you realize compounding is not just about finance, it's about life. You earn rewards by staying rational longer than others can stay emotional. So, yes, most people hit $1 million late in life if they ever do. But if you're patient, disciplined, and boring enough to let compounding work uninterrupted, you'll hit it early, quietly, and without needing anyone's approval. And that, my friend, is real wealth. Let's stop pretending everyone can be rich. They can't. Not because the system is rigged, but because human nature is. Most people will never become millionaires because they can't manage their own impulses for 5 minutes, let alone for 50 years. They have the attention span of a goldfish and the spending habits of a drunken sailor. They think discipline is optional and that success is about luck or timing. It's not. It's about behavior repeated consistently over decades. And that's exactly what most people refuse to do. They want the reward without the repetition. They want compounding without patience. They want financial independence while living like addicts. You can't drink champagne every weekend, drive a car you can't afford, and expect your balance sheet to respect you. Money, like nature, punishes stupidity without mercy. The middle class isn't trapped by income, it's trapped by imitation. Everyone is busy competing with their neighbor who is also broke. It's a grand circle of delusion powered by envy and credit cards. When I walk through a suburb, I see people drowning in debt but smiling for Instagram. 2 leased cars, an oversized mortgage, and not a penny invested. They think they're doing fine, but the truth is they're one job loss away from collapse. You can't build wealth on a foundation of pretense. You can't borrow your way into freedom. I once said, it's not greed that drives the world, it's envy. And I meant it. Envy destroys more fortunes than recessions ever will, because envy convinces people to copy the wrong things. They don't copy habits, they copy outcomes. They want the results without the restraint. They see a man driving a BMW and think, he's successful. They don't realize he's paying monthly installments, cursing his credit score, and praying interest rates don't rise. That's not wealth. That's slavery with better upholstery. Real wealth doesn't show. It hides in plain sight in modest homes, index funds, and paid-off debts. It's the quiet confidence of knowing you own your time, but most people don't want that kind of wealth. They want attention. They want admiration, and admiration costs money, lots of it. The irony is that the more you crave validation, the more you destroy the possibility of financial independence. Because every dollar you spend proving yourself is a dollar you'll never invest. And investing isn't just about markets, it's about restraint, resisting the urge to follow the herd when it's running off a cliff, resisting the emotional noise that says, you deserve this now. That word deserve has bankrupted more people than bad luck ever did. You don't deserve luxury until you can afford boredom. If you can't sit quietly with money in your account without spending it, you're not rich, you're just temporarily liquid. Another big reason people never reach $1 million, they interrupt compounding with debt. Debt is compounding in reverse. While your assets try to grow, your liabilities are growing faster. It's like planting seeds on one side of the yard while termites eat your house from the other. You can't win that battle. I've seen bright young people bury themselves under credit card bills for things they barely remember buying. They call it managing cash flow. Oh, I call it lighting your future on fire one payment at a time. Then there's the habit of constant upgrading. New phones, new cars, new houses, new clothes, all justified by rewarding yourself. It's the financial version of eating dessert for breakfast because you had a bad day. And delayed gratification isn't a moral virtue, it's a wealth multiplier. But in a world addicted to instant feedback, patience looks like poverty. So people keep spending to signal they're winning. They're not. When I was starting out, I learned a brutal rule. You can't save what you flaunt. The moment you start showing off, you've already lost. The first step to becoming rich is simple. Stop caring about looking rich. The second step, never interrupt compounding for something that won't matter in 5 years. Most people can't even pass the first step. They'll justify every purchase, rationalize every loan, and convince themselves they're investing in experiences. Fine, but experience don't pay dividend. The truth is, most people don't want wealth. They want the appearance of success without the sacrifice it takes to earn it. They want the feelings, not the fundamentals. That's why when recessions come, and they always come, they get wiped out. They built castles in the sand and acted surprised when the tide returned. You want to know how to avoid that fate? Live like you're slightly poorer than you are. Invest like you're slightly wiser than you feel. And never let envy dictate your decision. Wealth doesn't require brilliance. It requires character. And character is the one thing no one can fake for long. If you can resist the need to impress others for 20 years, you'll end up owning what they're still financing. You'll quietly pass $1 million while they're still pretending. Because wealth isn't measured by what you buy. It's measured by what you don't need to sell. Most people treat compounding like a formula. It isn't. It's a philosophy, a way of seeing the world that rewards patience and punishes impulsiveness. The math is easy. The mindset is rare. You can show anyone a compound interest calculator and they'll nod. But ask them to live by it, to stay consistent, calm, and boring for decades, and they'll fail spectacularly. Because compounding doesn't just grow your money, it reveals your character. The compounding mindset is simple. You play a long game in a world addicted to the short one. You let time do the heavy lifting while others exhaust themselves chasing quick results. It's not about brilliance, it's about endurance. If you can endure boredom, envy, and temporary setbacks, you'll win. Not because you're smarter, but because you're still in the game after everyone else burns out. You see, wealth doesn't reward intelligence. It rewards survivors. Compounding is fragile in the short term, unstoppable in the long term. That's why survival is everything. A few good decades can make up for a few bad years, but not the other way around. If you lose 50%, you need 100% just to break even. That's why avoiding stupidity is more important than chasing brilliance. It's not about how much you make, it's about how little you lose. I've always said it's remarkable how much long-term advantage people like us have by trying to be consistently not stupid instead of trying to be very intelligent. That's compounding thinking. It's defensive by nature. It focuses on avoiding errors rather than seeking excitement, because every unnecessary risk you take today delays the payoff that time owes you tomorrow. When Warren and I found See's Candies in 1972, we didn't see fireworks. We saw durability, a simple, honest business that could compound quietly year after year. No miracle, no magic, just consistency. Decades later, it became one of Berkshire's sweetest deals, literally and financially. Why? Because we let time do what hustle never could. Most people destroy compounding by constantly tinkering. They can't help themselves. They trade, they panic, they react to headlines. They want control. But compounding only works when you stop touching it. It's like a bar of soap. The more you handle it, the smaller it gets. You want to get rich? Learn to sit still. Inaction feels uncomfortable, but it's where the real action happens. The market rewards the patient and robs the restless. Think of it this way. Your capital is like a soldier. Every time you move it unnecessarily, you send it back to boot camp. If you just let it stay deployed, it'll conquer more ground on its own. The compounding mindset also applies beyond money. Knowledge compounds. Habit compound. Reputation compound. Every decision either builds your base or erodes it. That's why I've always told people avoid low-quality associations, avoid stupid temptations, and avoid bad habits. They compound too, just in the wrong direction. When I was younger, I read all the time, not because it made me feel smart, but because it compounded quietly. Each book added a little more context, a little more judgment. You won't notice it day by day, but over years you become unrecognizable to your former self. That's compounding in its purest form, incremental, invisible, and inevitable. Most people fail to understand this because they want visible progress. They want applause. But compounding hides its rewards until it suddenly reveals them all at once. That's when outsiders call it luck. Luck? No. It's just the delayed display of consistent effort. If you want to see compounding in real life, watch nature. A tree grows slowly for years before it bears fruit. Its roots expand underground, unseen. That's what builds its strength. Humans, meanwhile, keep chopping down their progress every time they get impatient. You can't dig up your tree every week to check if it's growing. You can't panic every time the weather changes. You plant, you water, you wait. That's the mindset. People say, "Charlie, what's your secret?" I tell them, I'm not smarter than others. I'm just older, and I didn't blow myself up along the way. That's the compounding mindset distilled into one sentence: don't blow yourself up. Stay rational when others panic. Stay patient when others rush. Stay humble when others boast. If you can do those three things long enough, compounding will reward you in ways intelligence never could. But here's the catch. Compounding only works if you let it. It doesn't argue. It doesn't beg. It just quietly keeps score. And when you finally realize how powerful it is, it's usually too late to start. That's why the most valuable lesson you can learn early is this. You don't need to be extraordinary. You just need to stay consistent while others self-destruct. Because in the end, wealth doesn't go to the most brilliant. It goes to the most patient survivor who respected the power of time. Let me show you what compounding actually looks like, not in theory, but in the messy, boring, real world. Back in 1972, Warren and I bought a little candy company called See's Candies. We paid $25 million for it. At the time, plenty of so-called experts thought we were insane. They said, why buy a regional candy business when you can chase fast-growing tech stocks? Because we weren't chasing anything. We were buying endurance. See's wasn't a rocket ship, it was a cash machine. It made a modest profit year after year without needing constant reinvention. Its product was simple, its customers loyal, and its brand unforgettable. And that's what we cared about. Durability over drama. Over the next few decades, See's produced over $2 billion in pre-tax earnings for Berkshire, $2 billion from a $25 million purchase. That's an 80-bagger. But here's the key. There was no miracle moment. No breakout year. Just steady growth. Reinvested wisely. Protected by discipline. That's what compounding looks like in the real world. Boring, predictable, and unstoppable. We didn't need to be smarter than everyone else. We just needed to stay less stupid for longer. While others were jumping in and out of trends, we were letting time multiply quiet consistency into extraordinary results. That's the essence of what I've called the sit-on-your-ass investing strategy. You find a few outstanding businesses within your circle of competence, you buy them at a fair price, and then you sit still while compounding does the work. But most people can't do that. They can't stand the silence. They crave action, drama, movement, so they tinker. They trade. They ruin what would have been a masterpiece by trying to repaint it every week. It's like planting an orchard and replanting the trees every spring because you got bored waiting for fruit. You'll die surrounded by saplings. See's taught us something vital. Quality compounds faster than mediocrity ever can. The same principle applies to people, habits, and relationships. Choose quality, stick with it, and let time do its job. When we bought See's, we weren't just buying chocolate. We were buying trust. The kind of trust that customers pass down through generations. That's what compounds trust, reputation, and goodwill. And the same principle applies in life. Good behavior compounds. So does bad behavior. If you're honest, disciplined, and rational long enough, life will reward you. If you're impulsive, envious, and reckless, life will punish you every single time. I've seen people with all the intelligence in the world destroy themselves because they couldn't sit still. Brilliant traders, clever businessmen, they made money fast, lost it faster, and never learned the difference between skill and luck. The ones who last, they look boring. They drive modest cars, live below their means, and compound quietly while the loud ones burn out. That's why Berkshire isn't full of geniuses. It's full of survivors. People who understand that the game isn't about speed, it's about staying power. If you want to see compounding in human form, look at Warren. The man's been doing the same thing for over 70 years, reading, thinking, investing, waiting. He started building his wealth before most people start building excuses. In his 20s, he was already compounding knowledge faster than his peers could waste it. And by the time he hit middle age, the snowball was too big to stop. People always ask, how did Warren Buffett become one of the richest men alive? It's simple. He started early and never stopped. He didn't need higher IQ, better tools, or special luck. He just needed time and temperament. Most people have neither. They underestimate the power of long-term focus because they can't imagine staying consistent that long. But that's exactly why it works, because almost nobody can do it. If you can delay gratification longer than everyone else, you've already won. You don't need to beat them in intelligence. You just need to outlast their stupidity. See's Candies taught me that lesson better than any stock chart could. It's not about finding the next rocket. It's about holding on to the compounding engine you already own. The world is full of people chasing new opportunities. But the real winners are the ones milking the old ones that still work. That's the Berkshire way. And it's the same way you should build your own wealth slowly, sensibly, and without drama. You don't need 50 investments. You need a few great ones you can hold forever. And you don't need to be right every time. You just need to avoid being fatally wrong. That's how compounding wins quietly, inevitably, and without asking for attention. The scoreboard will take care of itself. All you have to do is stay in the game. The middle class loves to believe they're financially comfortable. They're not. They're financially fragile, and most don't even know it. They live paycheck to paycheck in a nice neighborhood, drive leased cars, and post vacation photos that look rich, but it's all smoke and mirrors. It's not wealth. It's leverage dressed up as lifestyle. The middle class illusion is dangerous because it feels safe. It convinces you that having things equals having money. But those are very different games. Real wealth is invisible. It's savings, investments, ownership, and freedom. Illusory wealth is visible cars, gadgets, and branded garbage that empties your wallet and fills your ego. People don't realize how close they are to collapse. One job loss, one illness, one market downturn, and the entire structure crumbles. They built a castle on credit and decorated it with debt. I've said before that it's not greed that drives people, it's envy. And envy is precisely what keeps the middle class broke. They don't measure progress by independence, they measure it by comparison. If their neighbor upgrades to a bigger house, they need one too. If their coworker gets a new car, they find a way to finance one. It's a never-ending game of imitation, played by people who don't realize no one's actually winning. In the 50s, being middle class meant stability. You owned your home, saved for retirement, and raised kids without fear of bankruptcy. Today, it means juggling loans while pretending everything's fine. Most middle-class people are one financial shock away from disaster, yet they'll tell you they're comfortable. Comfort, in this case, just means not panicking yet. The middle class doesn't go broke overnight. It dies slowly from 1,000 small indulgences that compound into dependency. Upgrades, subscriptions, status spending, it all looks harmless until you add it up. If you think small leaks don't sink big ships, ask the Titanic. The real danger isn't poverty, it's illusion. Poor people know they're poor. They adjust accordingly. Middle-class people think they're safe, and that's what makes them reckless. They live for appearances. They confuse credit with capability. And they convince themselves that debt is normal. So is obesity, stupidity, and self-delusion, but I wouldn't recommend them as life goals. I once met a man who made $250,000 a year but had less than $5,000 in savings. He laughed when I told him he was broke. Then he lost his job, and the laughter stopped. You don't measure wealth by what you earn. You measure it by how long you could live if your income stopped tomorrow. For most people, that's less than 3 months. That's not comfort. That's captivity. They built lives so expensive that freedom is impossible. And then they wonder why the rich seem so calm. It's because the rich own their time. The middle class rents it. Every time you finance something you don't need, you're signing a small piece of your future away. You're selling hours of your life in advance for trinkets you'll forget in a year. That's not just a financial mistake, it's a philosophical one. I've always said that wealth is the ability to survive mistakes. The Middle class can't afford any. One bad decision and they're back to zero. They call it the rat race for a reason. It's a treadmill powered by envy and ignorance. You run harder, you sweat more, but you never move forward. And most people die on that treadmill still thinking